Okay, hopefully we're live. Hopefully this is working. Hi guys, hope everyone's doing well. Looks like we've got a good few people in here already. 19 people, that's great. If everyone can hit the like button, that would be awesome. Oh, wicked. Okay. So we've got people from California, from Netherlands, from London, all over the world. Awesome. Good day, mate. I'm assuming you're Australian. That's awesome. People from all over. Wicked. From Spain. Wow. How's the sound, everybody? How's it looking? How's it sounding? Someone let me know. This is a first time for me, so it's probably going to be all sorts of chaos. Got the beer on the go for the anniversary. Bit of Wingman by Brewdog for all you connoisseurs out there. Oh, wicked. Loud and clear. Looks and sounds good. Brilliant. Excellent. Chris, good to see you, Chris. Hope you're recovering well. Thorsten, good to see you, buddy. Jim C, great to see you as always. Okay, let me start with a bit of playing. I was just going to run through a chord melody, Darn That Dream. And then if someone can chuck your questions in, if anyone has anything they want to ask, we'll get the Q&A section underway. Great, some good questions already. Brilliant. Let me scroll up and see so I don't miss anything. David Lemon, how come that telly never got a pick guard? So yeah, usually there is one on here, but again, I'm going through a bit of a transition pickups wise. So I'm still adjusting the heights of everything. These are my prototype signature pickups, in fact, from Sun Bear, and I'm so unbelievably happy with them. They're called the Farran 5s, and they'll be out soon. Very low output, vintage vibed pickups. Alnico 5 bridge and Alnico 5 neck, like I say, low wound. I'd recommend checking them out if you're after a new set of pickups for your telly. So yeah, just messing with the height on these at the moment. I think I've pretty much dialed them in, so the pickguard will be going back on very soon. Let's see, Flint settings. Good question. So I'm not using my Flint right now. I'm using the Lazy J10, this amp in the corner here, with the inbuilt tremolo, and I set it quite subtle. It's not very deep, and I tend to set the flint the same way. The intensity, usually I set it at about 10 o'clock from memory, and speed probably about the same, and I have it on the 60s mode, basically with not the harmonic trem mode. Let's see, what else have we got here? Good question from Roy. Good to meet you again, Roy. It's been a while. So, did you find when you learned gypsy jazz style picking that it interfered with your regular technique? It did, massively. Yeah, it was difficult. So back in sort of mid-2000s, probably for about a 10-year period, I was obsessively playing gypsy jazz on gypsy jazz style guitars. And for any of you who know, the gypsy technique for the right hand is very demanding, and it requires you to use a rest stroke and start with a downstroke anytime you go to a new string, which takes a lot of getting used to if you come from more modern styles. Like I grew up playing rock and alternative and indie and stuff. It's pretty strange to suddenly have to really think about the right hand, because up until that point, I'd basically just played alternate picking, I guess, for the most part. And then once I got used to doing that, it took a long time, literally a good few years of forcing myself to do it. I started to then assimilate that into my normal alternate picking. And now I'm at a point where I'm quite happy with my picking style. It's usually alternate, to be fair. But when there's a note that I really want to have pop out, I'll use the rest stroke, bring in a bit of that gypsy flavor. Especially for acoustic guitar, it's more noticeable. On electric, you can kind of get away with things a bit more. But if you're playing an acoustic, your plectrum is the thing that's going to bring that tone out. So when you're playing kind of single note melodies, you need that heavy downstroke. So yeah, tough one to get used to doing, but once you get it, you'll be able to use it in a little bit more of a flexible way. I wouldn't get too obsessed about doing it on every single new string. I would just try and get it to a point where you do it depending on the tone you want. When you want the note to pop, use a bit of gypsy picking. Okay, next question. Let's see. Hello from Texas, Bo Nana. Cool name. Tell us about that particular telly. Okay, so yeah, this is actually a master-built telly from 2018, I think. It was a Paul Waller one, and I traded a couple of other custom shop tellies to get it. So it's it's not a legit vintage, but it looks like a legit vintage, and it feels like one. And the pickups have changed a lot over the years. Like I say, I've got my prototype signatures in there at the moment from Sunbear, and they're without doubt the best I've put in here. It's got a really nice neck, kind of medium. Don't know if that you can tell from the side angle there. It's sort of medium, and it stays pretty much the same thickness from the first fret all the way up until the last. It's got jumbo frets, which I'm not so keen on. They've got a lot of wear on them now because I've used this a lot over the years. So I'll probably refret it at some point with some slightly narrower, more vintage style fret wire. Yeah, great guitar. It's worn in a way that looks a bit more natural to me than some of the other master builds. Okay. Interested in your thoughts on committing songs to memory. Would you suggest memorizing chord names, Nashville numbering system, repetition? So that's from John Andre. Good question. For me, committing songs to memory is about pretty much all of those things. The numbering system, I don't think of it as the Nashville numbering system. Personally, I just think about the intervals in relation to the key center. So for example, the key of A, song that starts on the 1, goes to the 3, the 4, the 4 minor, the 5, back to the 1. That's how I'm thinking about things. If you map things out that way from the get-go, you will memorize stuff quicker because you're seeing sort of the system underneath it all, I guess. But also just lots of muscle memory repetition. As a self-taught player, theory came really late for me, and I did a lot of my sort of formative years just playing songs from memory, just thinking purely shape-wise and sound-wise, trusting my ears a lot of the time. So there's something to be said for both approaches. You know, muscle memory is crucial to get it to sound right. The more you do that, the more you'll memorize stuff. And then if you can start to put labels and names to the things that are happening in the song, you'll just remember it that much longer. So yeah, kind of all of those things really. Just make sure that you're not shying away from repetition. I know it's tedious, but everybody has to do it. You know, one part of a song over and over again till you can really nail it. Please tell us how to sign up for a lesson, from JP Folds. Okay, so the easiest way is to use the TidyCal link that's in the description on all of my videos. If you go back to my previous video, you'll see it in the description there. It's like an interactive calendar. It will show you the slots that are available. Automatically moves things to your time zone as well. So you just select your slot, you prepay, and then we meet on the day over Zoom. David Lemon. Hi, Alex. Can you talk briefly about your guitar playing journey, how you started and all that good stuff? Yeah, that's a question I get asked a lot. So I started on piano. My nana, who was a great piano player, she taught me to play piano from about the age of 5, you know, to read music and to trust my ears a little bit. And she would give me little challenges, play melodies, I'd have to play them back at her. So that was really useful. And then I got into playing drums. I don't know why. I think someone got me a drum kit and I just thought, right, okay, that's me now. I'm a drummer. And then I got to 9 years old and my uncle Lyndon, who's my nana's youngest son, is a great guitar player. And he worked down at Maida Vale Studios at the BBC as a sound engineer. He used to come back like twice a year to visit family. And he just always looked so cool, you know, denim jacket, long hair, white Stratocaster. So I just thought, right, that's it. Guitar, that's what I want to do. So I started playing guitar. He taught me a few things. Every time he'd come back for Christmas or birthdays, he'd set me a new challenge, like learn the Hotel California solo or, you know, learn the intro to Stairway to Heaven. I remember the first thing he asked me to do was learn how to play More Than a Feeling, just that first solo. He didn't give me any clues. He just said, do it by ear. And it was really, you know, important lessons for me, those, to really leave me to my own devices a little bit. And then just from that age, I was just getting in bands all the time. Even at 10 years old, we would put gigs on in the garage and, you know, sell tickets around the neighborhood. Great times, really, thinking back. I was never not in a band. So a lot of my learning came through lots of rehearsals and gigs and stuff like that. Always open-minded musically as well. You know, I was playing in rock bands and alternative bands back then, you know, Radiohead, that kind of stuff. But always had an ear for jazz and bluegrass and everything, really, even heavy metal. My recommendation is to never shut yourself off from a genre, because there's always something you can learn from it. Yeah, and then just to cut to sort of more recent times, when I was a bricklayer. When I left school, I got into the building trade and I was a bricklayer for like 8 years, but gigging at weekends and doing a lot of production in the evenings and, you know, mixing and writing and recording. Crazy productive times, really, looking back. But at one point I thought, you know, I need to do something here to prevent my hands getting completely battered. So I decided I wanted to teach guitar. And to do that, I knew I had to learn a bit of theory because I didn't really know much at all. So I just forced myself to learn it from books, from the internet, just any source I could get. I would go deep into theory through jazz. You know, it's like the best way to learn theory, in my opinion, is learn to play jazz, because you can't really play jazz without it. To most of it, you know, sometimes you can do a little bit, but generally speaking, you do need theory for that. Let's see. Chris Mullin, Alex, you obviously have great command of the fretboard. How did you develop that? Do you have any suggestions? Yeah, I think, again, it was just, for that stuff, it's just learning songs, lots of songs, trusting my ears, and forcing myself to try and name things. You know, I would play something, and then I'd make sure that I could close my eyes, not have the guitar in my hands, and visualize where that stuff sat on the fretboard. And I'd force myself to name the notes. You know, it was kind of mind games. You lie in bed at night trying to picture the fretboard and think, okay, what does an F-7 arpeggio look like, and what notes am I playing? You know, that doing that kind of stuff will give you gradually a real awareness of the fingerboard. You don't have to try and memorize stuff off a chart, within a week. I never thought that was a good way of doing things, to be fair. It's a gradual thing. Any tips on how to master hybrid picking from Tim Dale? Okay, so yeah, hybrid picking is definitely something I'm really into. It's probably my main method of playing, and I do have some good tips on it. So obviously, on one hand, you want to be quite comfortable with finger picking as a separate issue and using a plectrum on its own. And then you're basically combining elements of the two techniques. If you're comfortable with that and you want to get into some exercises, what I'd recommend doing is taking the top 3 strings, for example. You could take any shape you like, but let's say a blues turnaround, one of these kind of things. And start with the G string with the plectrum, 3rd finger picking the top E, 2nd finger on the B. And get used to keeping steady rhythms and getting every note the same volume. Then work on going the other way, ascending. And then just speed it up. It's a tricky little technique to get used to doing, but if you do it slowly, build up your speed over time, you'll get it. Chords as well. Take like an A chord here, for example, a bar chord, and practice picking strings in pairs, but with a string missing in between. So say, for example, the low E and the D string with the pick and the 2nd finger, and then the A string and the G string with the pick and the 3rd finger. And again, keep a steady beat, and then work your way through the pairs of strings. With the emphasis being on steady rhythm and clean notes. There's so many good hybrid picking exercises, but they would be good places to start for sure. Let's see, what else have we got? Oh, thanks, Bo. You love the lap steel style chord playing. Yeah, I love that stuff too. It's brilliant. Jim C. If I've ever met John Pizzarelli, no, but I'm a big fan of his. He's great. Great 7-string jazz player. Yeah, and of course his dad, Bucky, jazz legend. Brilliant. Okay, Carlos Funk. Couple of questions. Having been a fingerstyle player most of my days, but now I've been using a pick much more. Any help with alternate picking? Yeah, alternate picking. So the exercise I get most of my students to do. This is where the metronome comes in handy. Let's say 4/4 time, 60 beats per minute. Okay, hopefully you can all hear that. Take a scale that you know really well. Helps if there's 2 notes per string, so the pentatonic minor is perfect. Start with all downstrokes, playing quarter notes. And then up to 8th notes, bring in the alternate picking. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. I'd recommend trying to free float the hand as well, the picking hand. And then you move up to triplets. Again, alternate picking all the way through. And then 16ths. And of course you want to do that through all 5 shapes of the pentatonic. Try and really lock in with the beat. And of course course, the next step is to increase that bass tempo from 60 to maybe 70. Just increase it by 10 each time and really work on locking it in. That's the important thing, getting that rhythm locked in. That's the most important thing with alternate picking. Think of it as being timing based. You know, usually for the most part, at least, anything on the number will be a downstroke. Anything on the and will be an up. So 1 and 2 and 3 and would equate to down, up, down, up, down, up. If you have a phrase that starts on an and, so and 1 and 2, for example, you start with an upstroke, up, down, up, down. Okay, next question. William Dawson, question on fretboard visualization. Do you always know what intervals and notes that you are playing, or does it become muscle memory after you have studied the neck and know it well? That's a good question. I think I always know, to be fair, I do always know what interval I'm going for. I try and play by hearing the sound first, usually. You know, sometimes you're playing so fast that you are relying on muscle memory a little bit and winging it. But if I'm playing a slow melody over a chord, I'll think, okay, I want to hear the sound of the sixth. And I'll know where to get that note, you know, where to access it all over the fretboard. You know, you might be thinking in terms of the name of the note, looking for that F sharp, the sixth, in relation to the A. Or you might just be thinking in relation to a position, which is fine as well. You know, you might be thinking caged system, where you think about the sixth being in this position in relation to that root note. So you're thinking from a sort of an anchor point as opposed to just freely thinking about the note. That's okay, that's fine, that's how a lot of people play. I guess I do a little bit of both. Sometimes I am thinking of shapes, but to be fair, yeah, usually I am hearing the interval and aiming for that particular interval. And a good way to learn that, by the way, is to use ear training apps. There's some really good ones. There's one called Relative Pitch that's good. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, and another one called Functional Ear Trainer. There's a bunch of these kind of apps, and what they do is essentially they will play the anchor note. So say, for example, in the key of A, they'll play an A, and then there'll be another note played after it, and you have to name that interval by counting your way up through the scale to begin with. Then eventually you'll just hear that and immediately know that that's the seventh, for example. It takes a long time. You want to drill that stuff every day for a good 5 or 10 minutes. Roy Driscoll. Okay, how do you decide you've practiced a tune enough for public performance? I guess for me, it's a case of being so comfortable with it that I could add my own embellishments here and there. You know, if I know a song well enough that I can start to reshape it a little bit, then I know I really know it. Maybe it could take a couple of weeks of solid practice on a particular song for me to feel truly like I own the thing. I'd recommend recording yourself. I think that's really important, actually. That's something that I should do a video on at some point, how to set up a simple little recording setup and record yourself playing against backing tracks or solo. Because when you listen back, you'll hear it so differently to how you perceived it as you were playing. So yeah, record yourself a lot. If you can play it, the old adage is if you can play it 4 times in a row perfectly, then you've got it. I would maybe increase that to 8 times, just in case. Chris Mullen, any suggestions on developing skills related to playing over changes? Yeah, start with triads for sure. Let's take the first few chords of Bossa Dorado. That's a piece I did a lesson on a while ago. So the chords would be D minor, E7, and then you have a 2-5-1 in the D minor. So that would be E minor 7 flat 5, A7, D minor. Now if we simplify that into triads, we've got a D minor triad. Then the E7, we'd be thinking E major. Now this is a cool little trick. I'm sure you already know this. but this is, if you think of your E minor 7 flat 5 chord, if you remove the E, what are you left with? You have a G minor triad. That's a really nice shortcut. You know, it's much easier to think G minor than it is to think E minor 7 flat 5. So now you'd have D minor to E major to G minor, and then for the A7 we simplify to A major, and then back to your D minor. And just start with that. Obviously you want to learn these inversions across your string sets. So for D minor you'd have all of these options on the top 3 strings. For E you'd have these. For G minor, A, back to the D minor. And what I would do here is use a looper. So I've got one ready. And then use those triads. D minor, E, G minor, A, D minor. Next string set. Okay, so that's triads, and then you start to add some of that color back in that was missing. So for example, the flat 7s on any of those dominant chords. So D minor to E7, add the flat 7 in. So you've got your E major triad. The great thing is if you know your triads really well, you've already mapped out where your 5th, your root, and your 3rd is for every chord. All you've got to do to find the flat 7 is find the root, move it down a whole tone. You could even make it a feature of the melody to walk chromatically down. So E7, E major triad with a walk down to the flat 7. Next inversion. Same applies to the A7. So let's see if we can chuck that in now. Listen to the color that that brings to things. So, I could go on for hours about that, but I guess we better leave that there. So triads, and then start to bring in some of the colorful extensions like flat 7s. Let's see, where was I in the questions? Okay. Ignacio asks, "Hi Alex, should I learn a song I love, though it is above my current level, or an easier one that's not so attractive to me?" That is a good question. The harsh answer is you have to learn songs even if you don't like them sometimes, because as a guitar player, you will often find yourself in positions where you're playing songs that you're not necessarily that attached to, but the professional side of yourself has to take over and, do a good job. But from a learning point of view, obviously you're going to feel more motivated to practice if you love the song. So I would say learn the song that you love, but simplify it. There's no harm in that. As long as you're playing the melody or the chord progression, you can't really go wrong. Let's see. Thomas Gray, can you throw me a rockabilly lick? Okay, I can. Why not? Let's get some slapback delay going. Name that tune in the comments, guys. See who can get there first. On Road Again. I like that name. You must be a Yorkshireman. Great look, great sound. What are you using for camera and audio? Okay, so yeah, this is my first live stream. I experimented for about 4 hours before we started. And I ended up using the camera I use for my main videos, which is a Sony ZV-E10. It's a really good camera. I didn't realize, it's a 4K camera, but apparently it only streams in 720 unless I buy some extra little gadget. So I'll get one of them for the next session because I fancy doing one of these again at some point. Audio-wise, I'm using a Rode something. I think it's called the camera mic or something really obvious like that, and it's sat on top of the camera. I was going to use like a condenser mic, but I decided the easiest option was to do a bit of an all-in-one solution. It sounds decent, I think. I did a couple of tests. Tim Dale, I'd love to hear any of your recordings. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, the idea is to put a solo record together at some point soon. So yeah, watch this space. Carlos Funk, you play a lot without looking. Is that important? I don't think it's important to try and like consciously play without looking, but I think naturally, if you start to play, if you find that you're not having to look, it means you're getting more and more comfortable with the instrument. So it's a kind of, I guess it's like a manifestation of your confidence growing. And I guess it's good to rely on your ears. Remember that music is something you should hear and not see. Not that reading music is bad. Any lessons on melodic minor, John Andre? Lydian dominant and altered scale in the back of your mind? Yes, literally those very things. They're in I have a list of lessons that I wanted to get around to doing, and they're right near the top about, right now. So melodic minor, brilliant sounding scale. One of my favorite sounds, actually. So yeah, that will definitely be featured. Chris Mullen, scales, arps, triads, do you think there is a priority order? Yeah, I would say scales, well, the major scale, certainly, and your pentatonic scales. Major scale first and foremost, because that's where you're going to generate your triads from. Of course, you take a major scale and you take the root, the third, and the fifth, and that's where you get your triad notes from. So you want to be very comfortable with the scale before you get onto your triads, then get into your triads, then arpeggios. Because in a similar way, arpeggios are basically just your triads, but with an extension added to them, like a 7 or a 9 or whatever it might be. Nick says, love your taste in music and guitar influences. You've touched on some Bill Frisell licks and concepts. Any chance of doing a full lesson? Yep. Again, that's in my list of things to get round to very soon. I was going to maybe take his playing on Moon River or Angel Song. I'm not fully decided yet. Something off that record. And break it down into a bit of detail and look at how to reuse some of his ideas. Definitely one of my favorite players, one of my biggest influences as well. Steve, like Carlos, I'm kind of trying to transition from fingerstyle to hybrid, but I wonder if I'd be better off with a thumb pick. Yeah, thumb picks are cool. I mean, I went through a period of playing loads of Chet Atkins and Tommy Emmanuel stuff, and I got really into using a thumb pick for a while. But then I guess for me, I always want to do what I can without needing extra gear, and I would often find that I didn't have a thumb pick in my pocket, for whatever reason. So I went back to just playing without a thumb pick. I don't grow my nails long either. They're pretty short, so I tend to be plucking the string with the pad, the fleshy ends of my fingers, which definitely results in some blisters when you first start doing that. But you do get the calluses going, and they sound almost as good as nails to me. John Andre, think of them as the same. Yeah, good point. Triads, arps all live within the scale and vice versa. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and Chris, yeah, that's totally it. You've got to try and put it to use in the moment when you're playing, and that's why triads are so good, because you've got less to think about. Just 3 notes, stay on one string set, do a lot of horizontal movement, play really slow melodically, try and sort of make things sound quite vocal. Box88 asks, your string gauge on your acoustics? Yeah, so I use 12s on my OM21 and 13s on my HD28. I constantly experiment with different types of strings. So at the moment on the HD28, I've got Tomastic Spectrums that Adam Levy recommended, and they're brilliant strings, probably my favorites so far. But on my OM21, which is quite bright sounding, I use Phosphor Bronze, just regular Diodario. David Lemon, Alex, getting back to the tellies for a moment. Now that you have a Nachocaster in your master built, where do you find differences between 2 such high caliber vintage inspired instruments? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I could definitely be happy with just one of them. It'd be really hard to pick which one. I'd probably lean towards the Nachocaster just a little. It's just a bit more resonant, a bit lighter, a bit more lively. But this has something about it that's unique as well. Every guitar will have some kind of flavor that the other one doesn't have. This is quite, I guess I think of this as quite percussive. It's quite spanky, almost Strat-like. Whereas the Nacho is a little more almost acoustic in its resonance. It's so lively. Rafa, why does this thing keep scrolling down every time I try and read a question? YouTube needs to figure this out. Where are we? Here we are. Alex, how you keep control of time, beats, bars when you are composing, improvising? I think that is something you've just got to try and learn to feel. At least always be fully aware of where the downbeat is. Beat 1 of a bar. I'd recommend practicing that stuff, again, with a metronome. And it will shape your phrasing. What I would tend to do is try and make your phrases short and vocal-like. Imagine you have to take a breath to sing the next line. Let's pick the changes for All of Me. Let's say kind of a slow tempo, 120. So we're thinking C, E7, A7, D minor, A7, D minor, E7, A minor, D7, G7, back to C. F minor, C, down to the A, D minor, G7, trying to play without a backing, but make sure that what you play outlines the changes. Obviously, you don't have to be saying the chord names out loud as you do it. Just try and think them. Where are we? Sorry for the gaps between questions. Need some elevator music playing in the background. John Andre, yeah, good point as well. Problem was that I originally practiced 2 to 3 octave scales, great for muscle memory, but found I really learned them when I broke it down to triads and scales around them. Totally true. Because the thing is as well, you don't want to end up zipping through entire scales when you're improvising. You want to try and keep things local, keep things connected in close little pockets. Andrew MacArthur, any tips for bending one note of a triad while keeping the others on tune, like in your Americana video? Yeah, that's down to kind of the fingering that you use for the triad. So for example, one of the things I do in one of my videos that I've had a few questions about before, say for example, D major. Let's say the second inversion triad up here. So on the top 3 strings, frets 14, 15, 14. Now normally you'd fret it with the first 3 fingers or barring with the first finger and using the second finger. But when you're going to bend a note, say we want to bend the G string, use your last 3 fingers and get some support behind the bending finger. It's really important that you can support that finger. Some of them don't need the support. For example, this D major triad. The important thing is that you plant the triad very firmly. Get your thumb around the back, squeezing. Make sure the thumb is supporting the shape. And then same with this one. This one is probably the trickiest because again, you need some support behind the bending note. Make sure that you're keeping in tune, like you say. Another good one to work on is the classic, where again, you want to be hearing the triad first and bending into that note on the G string from a whole tone below. Yeah, the main thing is support the other notes with good strength from the back of the fretboard with the thumb. Where are we? It keeps moving around. Who do you listen to of the current crop of roots guitarists? From Bradley Martin. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who classifies as roots. Most of my favorite players, I'm pretty old school. A lot of them are old players that they're not even with us anymore. So as far as modern players go, it sounds sacrilegious, but I don't really listen to a lot of modern guitar music. Yeah, give me some examples of modern roots players, and I'll let you know if I like them or not. Tim Dale, how many go-to scales do you use? Yeah, it's a tough question because it's so, it's context, isn't it? So from what I tell my students, I say the most important scales to learn would be the major scale, primarily, because it's so important as your sort of Rosetta Stone. It's what we reference everything to. It's your ground zero calibration point. So if you know that scale really well, you're more likely to be able to find arpeggios and triads and the like. Then in terms of scales you're likely to use when you're improvising, the truth is, no matter how advanced you get, you're always going to need the pentatonic scale. I know some people think it's something that you leave behind at some point, but you never do. It's such an important flavor, that blues sound. So yeah, your pentatonic scales, massively important, major and minor, all 5 shapes. And then colorful scales, if you're into jazz especially, you're going to want to know the melodic minor, which, as someone said in the comments earlier, is something that we need a deep lesson on, and I'm going to get around to doing that. Melodic minor scale, as well as its modes, so you can play over altered dominant chords, and the harmonic minor. And I guess those would be like the must-know scales, in my opinion. Obviously, there are more, but those ones will get you a long way. And those last 2 really are only important if you're into jazz and if you want to learn to play over jazz changes. Hey, Pocky Way. Good to see you, Gideon. Knowing a song well enough that you can reshape it, brilliant. Yeah, that's the way. If you know it well enough, you can reshape it like putty. Can I get the number of your interior designer? Yeah, well, I think you've got my number. I think you texted me when we did that pub quiz that we didn't win. But yeah, I've done all the decorating myself in this house. Jesus Retza, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Jesse from El Paso, Texas. What's the difference between rosewood and maple fretboard, and what do you prefer? I think the difference is just a feel thing for the most part. I know some people say they can hear the difference. For me, it's the maple feels, again, it's that splatty thing. It's a bit more, it feels like it compresses and squashes a bit earlier than rosewood. I mean, some of it might just be psychological. Who knows with that stuff? But I tend to favor maple boards for tellies. I like rosewood boards for Strats and for Gibsons and the like, of course. Thumbs up. Don't know how I made that happen. Do you do anything to help prevent the neck from getting sticky in humid weather? Yeah, that's tough, isn't it? I mean, this neck, like the Nacho, it's worn down on the back, so there isn't any lacquer really. There's no nitro on the back, so it doesn't really get sticky, which I guess is the ultimate solution. You know, I used to do it on more modern guitars with the poly finish on the back, which is terrible for that. You know, it practically melts when you're playing. I used to use a sandpaper, really fine grit, and take it down to the bare wood. Obviously, you only do that if you don't intend on selling the guitar. More bossa nova lessons? Yes, for sure, definitely. Planning to do a lesson on Desafinado or Aguas de Marco very soon. Mystery Train, yes. Che, you got it. You named it. Brilliant. A couple of others named it as well. Jed, yep, brilliant. You guys know your stuff. Thomas, brilliant. Yeah, nice. Quoting the lyrics as well. Great stuff. Andy, do you ever or would you do any collaborations with other YouTubers? Yeah, definitely. I've done some collaborations with Adam Levy, and there'll be more coming in the future. And I've spoken with other YouTubers, and we've thought about the idea of doing some stuff. Jason Locklin, had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago. We're going to do some stuff together as well. I think our styles match quite nicely. So yeah, watch this space for that. How you manage to be conversant with so many different styles? Do you practice them separately? John Parker. Yeah, I think it's that thing I was talking about at the beginning, you know, just being obsessed with all styles of music. Grew up playing the Beatles and Queen and bands that were very eclectic. You know, one record of theirs would contain bits of everything you could imagine. So it just seemed natural for me to want to explore all of those styles and go back to the roots of them all. Yeah, and I tend to go through phases of sort of slight obsession, you know, single-mindedness with a style, whether that's bluegrass, and I'll just devote myself to picking all the time bluegrass tunes and fiddle tunes, or whether it's jazz, where, you know, just get deep and obsessive about learning all the crucial standards and how to play over them. Tone is a big thing as well, isn't it? It's like you've got to listen to a lot of that music to know how you meant to verbalize it. You know, that's such a big part of it. It's not just note choice, it's how you deliver the notes that's so important. So that comes through listening a lot to a lot of different styles. Jerks Gently, great name. Sorry if you have answered before. What string gauge? So on this guitar, these are 10s, 10 to 46 pyramid max performance strings. Really nice strings, pure nickel. And that's my preference for tellies, is 10 to 46. I like 11 to 49 on ES335s. On my arch tops, you know, my old Gibsons, I'm using 12s, flat wounds on one and round wounds on another. Yeah, thanks, Hey Pockeyway. Yeah, exactly. I've done some stuff with Adam Levy on his channel, so do check that out. In fact, one of my upcoming lessons will be a lesson on the solo I played on that video I featured on with Adam. Thomas Gray, seems like you'd have no problem playing with Clapton. Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, if he asked, I'd be there. Florida Picker, J. Michael Harden. Florida Picker here. Thanks for all, Alex. Been using some licks of yours at shows. Can you talk about right hand technique for different things, i.e. changing up mid-song? Yeah. So right hand technique, there's the stuff I spoke about earlier with the gypsy picking, where it's important to free float the hand so you're not resting anything on the guitar. A similar thing with bluegrass. But I guess when you're playing, say for example, more modern, you need to be able to get that bright sparkle that you get from playing kind of, I guess the word would be adjacent to the strings with the pick, as opposed to that downward slant that's so prevalent in jazz picking. You want to almost get the pick up this way, so you get that extra sparkle. And then you've got styles that rely heavily on a loose wrist for strumming, funky kind of. Guitar. And then hybrid picking, a lot of the time you are actually resting the palm maybe on top of the ashtray bridge itself of the Telecaster. But as you can see with even that short passage there from Tommy Emmanuel's Mountains of Illinois, you're starting with the palm here, and then by the end you're free floating because you need a bit of everything tonally. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer. Probably a terrible answer I gave there, but you need to be able to do it all essentially and just practice every possible way of picking those strings. Yeah, Farran Campolongo collab. That would be cool. One of my favorite players. If he's a roots player, let's just call it. I'll say he's my favorite. John, have you considered a Roman villa or Bronze Age farm could be just inches below your lawn? Yeah, I have considered that, and I'm going to get the diggers in. What tremolo pedal do you use? From Ron. So today I'm just using the built-in trem on this amp, this fine Lazy J20. Oh, that's cool. You see my camera actually focused on it when I pointed at it. Nice. That's why I used this camera. Yeah, but usually if I'm not playing an amp with tremolo built in, which is rare to be honest, usually my amps have it built in, but I would go with a Strymon Flint. My J20, the bigger wattage version of this amp, doesn't have the tremolo, so I use the Flint for that. I also love the Jam Pedals Harmonious Monk, by the way, but I use that for the harmonic trem as opposed to the sort of Fender style trem. Mino, do you tend to think of arpeggios as scale-like patterns, or instead do you concentrate on the underlying triads and the interval extensions? Yeah, the latter, definitely. So I'm thinking, A minor. Thinking of triad stacks primarily. And then if I want A minor 7, I know where that flat 7 is because I know my scales, and I just add it. It's like supplementing. It's like putting a bit of ketchup on your chips. But yeah, triads definitely first and foremost, and then learn to add those extensions as and when. And that's where your ear can come in so handy, can't it? Because you might want to start with an A minor, go to the flat 7, and then you might want to make it A major on the way to D minor, for example. So you need to be able to hear that interval creeping up on you. you want to be able to hear it before you commit to it on the fretboard. Oh, that's great, Jim. I'm glad it makes you want to practice and explore the fretboard. That's what it's all about. Keep that spirit, keep the enthusiasm. Gideon, how is Louis? He's fine. He was trying to get in again earlier. He's been a bit noisy, so we've locked him out for now. He'll be back. Don't know where he is. Thanks, Chris. I'm glad you find it motivational. Hello from Alberta, Canada. Hi. I'd love to go there. Canada seems to be like a bit of a dream place to live, from what I've heard. Let's see, any more questions? Yeah, Robert Bright. Lazy J amp sounds great on your videos. How does it compare with, say, a Blues Junior? I've never been a particularly big fan of the Blues Junior. I used to use them a lot. A lot of venues would have them as their sort of backline amp. And I found that they were a bit inconsistent. And I've heard more recently that it can be a fire hazard. So that explains things. But yeah, they're not bad, but they're nothing compared to the Lazy J, to be completely frank. The Lazy J has a big multi-dimensional sound that really fills the room. Sounds way bigger than the cabinet. The cabinet is fairly small. It's about the size of a Princeton cabinet. But the amp sounds big. It's amazing. It always blows me away that the big sound that's coming out is coming from that small cabinet. Whereas with the Blues Junior, it always sounded like a small cabinet to me. I always wanted more bottom end and a bit less mids, a bit more of an open sound. I like the Pro Junior, with those lines of Fender amps. They're really cool. And I know Jeff Beck used those for a little while as well. Alex, it's time to learn the French harmonist master like Messiaen and Debussy. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of that. I do play quite a bit of classical. Well, I haven't done for about a year now, but it will come back around, and I will no doubt do a lesson on something like that. Do I have an opinion on Fender Jazz Masters, says Ron. Yeah, I love them, and I kind of wish I'd not sold mine. I'm tempted right now. There's a Jaguar that someone's selling on a forum, the fretboard forum over here in the UK, and it's really tempting. Because I kind of think the Jaguar might be the perfect version of the offset style for me. I liked the Jazzmaster a lot, but there was something kind of big and slightly cumbersome about it. I quite like the smaller scale length of the Jaguar, and Mark Rebo played one, so it can't be bad. Thanks for all the kind words, guys. I'm sorry if I'm skipping through and only reading out the questions. It's my first time doing this. Get together with Greg Koch. Yeah, that would be cool. He's an incredible player. Funny guy as well. Sure, it'd be good to work with. Jordan Officer. Yeah, I've heard him. He's great. He plays an ES 150, doesn't he? If I remember rightly, the Charlie Christian guitar. Yeah, Frizzell, Levy, Campolongo, those guys are my bread and butter as far as modern players go, for sure. Brilliant. Also, Ben Monder, one of my favorite modern players. More of a jazz guy, though, I guess, as opposed to a roots guy. Have you talked with Truefire? Not in depth, no. I think as well on that subject, I'm going to stick with my kind of approach for now, just doing the YouTube stuff. Although at some point it might be nice to do some courses, but I'd probably put them out under my own name. Gideon, I'd love to know what you think are essential values for a good musician to learn. Being on time, being nice, not being too loud, being sensitive to the music and to the musicians you're playing with, and don't try and play over anybody. Those things are probably the most important things of all. And then also to be tasteful in your playing. Make sure that you're always playing what you would like to hear if you were listening back to a song and you weren't the guitarist. The amount of times when I was younger, I'd play thinking I was doing some incredible stuff, and I'd get back and listen to a recording, and I'd be like, wow, if that wasn't me, I'd be ripping it to shreds, saying this guy doesn't know how to to sit back and enhance the song. Always play what you'd like to hear on a record. Ron, yes, pre-war style lessons, definitely. Matt Moonasterian, Jonathan Stout. Yeah, Matt is another one that I'm going to be doing some collaboration stuff with at some point soon. In fact, I had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago, and I need to edit some of that down for some examples to share on the Patreon, because he had some really good insights into rhythm playing. And I've done a couple of pre-war style lessons, check out After You've Gone and I'll See You in My Dreams, but I'll definitely be doing more. Do I wear a different hat for different genres? Yes, definitely. Stetsons are usually my go-to hat for any genre, but yeah, sometimes a flat cap is the thing for jazz. Best tips for mastering the fretboard. I think I answered this one earlier on, but just to summarize, I would make sure that you can visualize the shapes for whether it's arpeggios or scales or chords. Make sure you can visualize them without the guitar in your hands. Make sure you can sort of picture it as a chord grid almost, and name every note in your head. Give yourself a running commentary. Be observant. Say to yourself, okay, 5th fret of the low E string, and that note is A. 7th fret of the A string, and that note is E, and so on. Like, build the shapes that way. And it happens gradually. That's the main takeaway. Don't try and memorize the fretboard in a couple of weeks or something. It's a lifelong of work that, just do it gradually. John Parker, do you have a suggestion for a good value combo for a clean telly sound with reverb and trem? Yeah, there's so many good ones nowadays. I mean, I've always been really impressed with the Boss Katana, although it's not typically what you'd expect me to recommend because it's not a valve amp and it's not got the vintage vibe. But, they sound amazing, and they're like 150 quid secondhand, so hard to beat that. But if you can stretch your budget a little bit, I'd definitely look at some kind of a secondhand Princeton reverb or, a deluxe reverb. The deluxe reverb is probably my favorite amp ever made. So any kind of variation on that would be it for me. And they're getting more affordable, some of these things. Roy, can you recall any pivotal aha moments you've had during your playing journey? Aside from watching Alan Partridge, my pivotal aha moments, let me think. Yeah, I can remember one particular gig where I went through this phase because I was really into the Smashing Pumpkins and stuff like that. I had a JCM 800 Marshall stack that I carried everywhere when I was like 14. It was killer to take that thing up the stairs. It was mental. Don't know why I did that. And I had the gain all the way up, and I used to hit the front end of that with a Big Muff fuzz pedal for even more gain. I remember doing a sound check. We opened for a well-known punk band called the UK Subs. And the guitarist from that band came up to me afterwards, and he was really polite, but he basically said to me, he was like, you've got to chill that gain out. It's like, it's too much. You could take that pedal away and you still have the same power in your sound. And that stuck with me. From that point on, I reduced my gain levels consciously to the point where nowadays the most overdriven you'll ever hear me really get would be something like this, maybe. Which by my old standards would be clean, essentially. Not that there isn't a place for the high gain stuff, but it was a big lesson in, you don't need gain to make your sound cut. You need presence in your sound, and not volume as well. It's more about the frequencies, isn't it, I guess? A bit of sparkle and you'll cut through without needing that extra volume. So that was an aha moment for sure. Yeah, and another one. I remember when I first got into playing jazz, I was probably 15 the first time I tried to learn a Django thing, and it was a little bit soul destroying. It really upset me, to be honest. And I actually didn't want to play guitar for a good couple of weeks after that. And then one day I was listening to an interview with Mark Ribot, reading an interview with Mark Ribot, and he mentioned how important it is just to, he's a Django aficionado. And I think he was talking about how hard and difficult it is to play that stuff that Django played. But he basically said, this is paraphrasing, but something to the like of, you can play it with his style, with his character and his mentality without having to play it in his technical way. And it's really important to do a lot with what you've got. Whatever you know at the time, don't think that you don't know enough to make music, because you do. You can do beautiful things with such a small amount of material. And that was the thing that gave me some confidence, and I came back out of my funk. JP Folds, what songs or records do you recommend to understand Motown, soul guitar, Dupree and Mayfield? Yeah, I guess just any of the classic Motown and soul records. Listen to a lot of the Marvin Gaye stuff as well. And Ray Charles stuff from that era is really good for good choppy guitar playing. Jimi Hendrix as well, of course, had a lot of that style in his playing. I think there isn't necessarily a particular record I'd recommend. It would just be more a case of just listen to a lot of that genre, get a playlist on the go of that era, the late 60s, early 70s, that whole Stax thing. Brilliant stuff. Tim Dale, happy anniversary. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to have another sip of my my beer, my Brewdog Wingman. Decent stuff. Feels really awkward just being here, silently drinking, reading my computer screen. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. What does it say about me? Thanks for the Patreon lessons. Great content. Thank you. Bo, a truly absurd wish, an entire album of you just playing instrumental tunes with longish solos. Thank you. Yeah, well, maybe I'll do something like that at some point. I do plan on doing some originals, some probably mostly instrumental pieces. But yeah, why not? Maybe chuck a couple of standards on there as well, do my own take on those with some nice long solos. Any chance to see you playing in London sometime? Yeah, hopefully next year. The band I'm in is a band called The Most Ugly Child, and next year we're going to be doing more of that kind of stuff. We used to play down in London quite a bit, but things have been a little bit slow recently due to band members having kids and all that sort of stuff. We still play, but we play locally at the moment. Roy, laying down a vote for a lesson on Jeff Buckley's underappreciated guitar work. That is a great shout. Yeah. You know what? Let me add that to the list before I forget. That Grace album is one of my favorite albums of all time. That was a big aha moment when I heard that. One of the reasons I love Telecasters as well, not just Danny Gatton, but Jeff Buckley, Johnny Greenwood as well. Do you play rock and roll trio stuff? Says J. Michael. No, but I'd love to. I love that kind of stuff. Sometimes in our band we do like Sun Records era rock and roll covers, and I could do that stuff all night. I love it. Jim C, curious if your telly's pick guard was removed by you. Yeah, just while I'm adjusting the heights of these new Sunbear pickups, just so I can access the screws to this neck pickup. It'll go back on soon. Dr. Matt Walton. Hi, Alex. You may have already answered this. Do you have both the J10 as well as the J20? How do you determine which one? Yeah, so I have both now. I've only had the J10 for just over a week, and I gigged it a couple of times last weekend, and it had more headroom than I expected. So far, it's a winner. It obviously gets a bit quieter than the J10 for sort of this sort of volume level, playing in your front room kind of thing. It's a brilliant sounding amp. I would never hesitate to recommend anything that Jesse builds, whether it's the 10 or the 20. It definitely does break up a bit earlier than the 20, as you'd expect. It feels a bit squishier as well, because it's got the 6V6s and the 5Y3 rectifier, whereas the J20 is 6L6s and GZ34, although you can switch it out. But yeah, it's a slightly different feel, but very much the same kind of tone. Maybe a little more scooped in the mids, the J10, which was a bit of a surprise. Could just be that the speaker isn't fully worn in like it is on my J20. Same speaker in both, by the way, the Celestian Blue. Johnny Marr chords lesson. Yeah, maybe. that could be fun, couldn't it? Brilliant stuff. Amos Garrett. Gareth, I'd only heard of him a couple of weeks ago when I did my sleepwalk video. People kept mentioning his version, so I checked it out, and it was really impressive. Those big bends were absolutely crazy. Reminded me a little bit of Jack Pearson when he's playing that flying V. Mark Fisher, how do you think about playing horizontally versus vertically so you don't get stuck thinking about playing in boxes? Nick Drake lesson. Man, yeah, Nick Drake as well. That's another one. Let me add that to the list. This list is probably about 1,000 entries deep. This is the problem when you're into so much music. Yeah, Nick Drake, man, another huge influence on me. That Pink Moon record especially, just incredible. Yeah, so horizontal versus vertically. I like to do both. You know, for me, horizontal, there's something liberating about zipping around horizontally, isn't there? Like, that was something that I took on from learning the Django stuff. You know, Django will play a lick where he's zipping around. Before you know it, you've traveled from here to here. It's a great thing to be able to do, but sometimes you want to play vertically. You know, say for example, you're playing around a blues sort of groove, let's say in A. Yeah, sometimes you need to be able to stay in a box. But yeah, you need both, don't you? And I love both equally. Bluegrass lessons in future, definitely. I'm working on one at the moment, actually. Oh, I see Louis at the door. Do you want to let him in? Let's see if we can get on camera. Louis, come here. My partner Merrin just let him in. She's sitting here making sure that I don't bore everyone to death. Louis, come here. Here he is. Look at the camera, Louis. Check that out. Look, what's this? There we go. He's doing well. He's 16 years old now. Still goes out hunting for mice every day. Brings loads of them back. It's pretty grotesque. But he's a good boy. Good boy, really, if a bit noisy sometimes. Okay. Yeah, bluegrass lessons coming very soon. Plug for Duke Levine's Country Soul album. Probably found you through him. Nice. Yeah, Duke Levine's brilliant, isn't he? Super smooth player. I love his playing. Thoughts on learning to sing via the ear training that the guitar study leads us to? Yeah, singing melodies, then harmonizing. I would definitely recommend that. I think some of my biggest influences are singers and the vocal harmonies of groups like the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Eagles. You know, any group that can really harmonize beautifully. And yeah, I think that works well with learning the guitar, doesn't it? If you can play a note and sing it back to yourself, almost predict what you're going to play verbally. Hank says, your Chicago Blues Studley or Swampy Juke joint have so many great licks that can be used in other applications. Do you have a street trick for finding new homes for all these great licks? A trick? No, not really. I guess I just try and immediately move. If there's a certain sound that I'm digging, like if there's a certain lick, let's say something from that sort of swampy blues vibe. I would make sure that I can move that stuff, whether it's the carbon copy of that lick or not, doesn't make too much difference to me. It's more about what was the path that I traveled through. Be willing to reshape the thing and rephrase it, but take the same general roadmap and move it through all of your different keys immediately. Cool. Well, wow, we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. Flipping heck. Well, that was fun. You know, I was kind of nervous about this because of the gear, not knowing what was going to happen for one, but also it's very strange just being on your own in front of a camera live. It's not so bad when I'm recording, you know, my lessons, and I can edit them after and get rid of all my pauses and my thoughts. But this is difficult. But I will do it again, and I'm sure I'll get better at it. And it's been great to speak to you guys and to celebrate a year of lessons with you all. It's been a crazy year. You know, gone from thinking that no one would care about these lessons to having a pretty good community on Patreon there. Almost, well, over 1,000 members now. It's mad. So I'm really thankful to you guys for being here and for showing your enthusiasm and encouraging me to carry on. You know, it's strange for anyone who knows me knows I'm a bit of an introvert, and it's not what anyone would expect me to be doing, you know, putting myself out there like this. But I'm enjoying it. It's not torture. Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks for the kind words, and thanks for the great questions. Yeah, we'll do this again. You know, let's make it a regular thing, maybe once a month or once every 2 months. We'll see. But I think that would be cool. Roy, yeah, it was really hard to start posting on YouTube. I was basically like anti-social media for 10 years. I didn't post anything on anywhere. And then just decided one day to start posting on Instagram, just little jam things or whatever. And then got a lot of interest through that, picked up a load of new students and thought, why don't I teach some of these things? So I did. And it's fun. I enjoy it now. I hated it at first. You know, editing the videos would take me like 6 hours to edit one lesson, and it's 20 minutes. And, you know, when you first upload these things, you're getting like 200 views, and it's kind of a little bit disconcerting, a bit disheartening. But once it picks up momentum and you start meeting all these great people like yourselves, that's all the encouragement you need. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. Sorry if I didn't get around to any of your comments. Hopefully I got all of the questions answered. Mark Fisher, alternate tuning, good idea. At some point, I'm going to do... an R.L. Burnside lesson. That was a long way around of saying that. Cool. Okay, well, let's leave that there. Let's quit while we're ahead. And hope you guys have a great weekend. It's just started raining here. It was boiling hot yesterday. Strange weather. Right, see you all next time. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.